Hey, hey, hey. Time for an out-of-this-world story from rSpace. So your wife cheats, and your solution is to build her dream life with her former best friend. Sounds good to us. Today on rSpace, hit him with the Uno reverse card. My wife cheated, so I reconnected with her old best friend. Now we're building the life she always wanted. I've never believed that anyone needs to be the bigger person in life. If someone wrongs you in a very deliberate way, in a fashion where they knew what they were doing, still did it, and you got hurt in the crossfire, then there's even less reason for you to be a bigger person, even if it takes you years to get your revenge. In my case, I didn't need to take years, but I'm glad I didn't hold myself back from getting back at the cheating hoe that I called my wife. And I'm glad that my revenge ended up taking me down a much better route for myself. So I, 35 male, was married to my ex-wife, 32 female, for 6 years until a few weeks ago, and we dated for 3 years before that. For the sake of this, I'm just going to give her the name Lily. I was at a party that one of my friends was hosting, and she was a friend of one of his friends. That meant my friend didn't know too much about her, so I just decided to try my luck and approach her. She was very receptive, and she had a good sense of humor, and that was what really got my attention beyond her looks. From there, we started dating, and things were pretty smooth. Then I popped the question 3 years after. We got married, and that was it. However, over the 6 years that we were married, one thing that I noticed about her was that once she determined that she didn't like someone, they could do their utmost best to get back into her good books, but it wouldn't amount to anything. In that sense, she was rather disagreeable, and I tried to talk to her about it, but it didn't lead to much. But the good part was that that side of her rarely had anything to do with me, so it was easy enough for me to let it slide. The reason I'm mentioning that bad trait of hers is because it plays a big part in all of this. For things to make sense, I have to mention a lady that I'm going to call Daisy. So Daisy and Lily used to be really, really good friends. Like, from the way she described it to me back then, they were as close as can be. It seemed like a very wholesome relationship, and it was the kind of friendship that I even wanted for myself. The problems started when there was some kind of misunderstanding. I genuinely can't remember the details, and Lily didn't give Daisy the benefit of the doubt for her actions. Truth be told, at the time, I remember coming to the conclusion that Daisy was in the wrong, but not in a way that I deemed malicious. It just seemed like something had gone wrong, and someone had found themselves offended. Of course, Daisy tried and tried to apologize, but my stubborn-headed ex-wife absolutely refused to listen to anything that she had to say. That should have been a red flag for me, since the two of them had known each other even longer than I had known Lily. Yet it was so easy for her not to give her friend the benefit of the doubt. Looking back, it seemed like Lily was trying to milk Daisy's offense towards her, but when you do that, you expect the person to come and grovel. It didn't seem like Lily wanted that though, since she still wouldn't accept your apology even if you tried every day for a year. At that point, I had to stop talking to Daisy. I won't say that we were super close to one another, but I found her to be a very amiable person. Talking to her was nice, and she enjoyed most of the things that Lily and I enjoyed, so it was easy for her to tag along on a lot of occasions. I still had to let her go though, because the last thing I wanted was to be the person in the middle of that kind of fight. It was obvious how messy it could potentially become when, all of a sudden, Lily had no problem talking down on Daisy or letting her personal information slip. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't disgusted by that kind of behavior back then, but again, this was my wife. It was one major gross thing among a bunch of things that I still loved about her. And looking back, yes, I know that the situation that I was in with her wasn't healthy, since it made it sort of tough to confront her. That doesn't mean the confrontations never happened, but it means that I had to be very careful with the words I used, because I didn't put it past her that I could potentially be a victim of hers and she would never see how wrong she was. So with that, I've given you plenty of insight into Daisy and how she and my ex-wife stopped talking. Now, the more recent problem started when I made some stupid mistake at home. I did something dumb in the kitchen and ended up ruining something, and Lily got so mad. I offered to replace it since it was something that could be replaced, but she didn't want to hear anything I had to say. She just kept yelling and throwing a fit, and it was pissing me off. So the next thing I knew, I retorted, and that's how a whole messy argument started. It went on for almost an hour, and by the end of it, I just stopped saying anything to her. I couldn't keep fueling the fire, especially when it was like I was talking to a wall. She headed upstairs, came back downstairs dressed up, and then walked out of the house. I'm sure she wanted me to say something, but I absolutely refused to. She wanted to force me to talk or try to stop her from leaving the house, which seemed so childish to me. What happened to trying to communicate like adults? I know it was my fault because I've known her red flag when it comes to confrontation exists, and I've done very little to save myself from having to deal with it, whether by leaving her butt or putting my foot down. She came back home at 3 a.m., very visibly drunk. She looked an absolute mess, and that just pissed me off even more, because she knew what she was doing the entire time she got ready to leave the house. But she didn't think enough about coming back home in a state that didn't make her seem like a teenager who got their hands on alcohol. I'm not a fan of when people can't hold their booze and just drink until they lose their senses. I asked her where she was coming from, but her only response was to give me the middle finger and head upstairs. I think at that point I was fuming too much to not say anything, so I followed her up the stairs and kept asking her where she was coming from. I mean, I'm glad I was following her up the stairs because at a point she lost her footing and fell backwards, and she was more than fortunate that I was there to catch her. It was absolutely shameful to me. Eventually, we got upstairs and I asked her the question again as she went to lie down on the bed, still fully dressed. Now, I can't be sure what she said here because it was so muffled, but I swear it sounded like, "Trust me, you don't want to know." That was not the kind of thing that a husband wants to hear when his wife returns home, absolutely wasted, out of her mind, and dressed far from modestly. She fell asleep, and when I tried to shake her awake, she was basically knocked out, so I knew there was no point in me trying beyond that. I'd confront her in the morning, but since I knew that she was far from being conscious anytime soon, I just had a feeling to go through her phone, since I knew it was possible that I'd have more of an idea where she went to that night. It took me only a second after going into her gallery to see that she went to a club with one of her friends. The night started off with pictures of the two of them, but then soon after, they got to the club, and then the same guy started to show up in her photos over and over. The pictures ended at the club, so I couldn't tell what happened after that, but the last picture was taken 2 hours before she got back home. So I felt like I needed to know what happened in that time that remained. I went to her text messages since I knew the friend she went out with. At some point, which I think was while she was upstairs, she had sent a message to that friend telling her, "Let's go out. I need to get out of this house. He's being an a-hole." After that, the friend responded excited and talking about how it had been so long. Then, "What kind of vibe do you want?" "The kind to make him jealous." Needless to say, that part drove me up the wall, because again, it was a sign of how aware she was when she was making these horrible decisions. The whole mess started because I unintentionally messed up one of her small kitchen appliances, and I apologized and tried to make things right, but her response to that was to intentionally try to hurt me as much as she reasonably could in that moment. It was so sad to me. Now, there would have been no way for me to know what had happened if not for the fact that Lily's bad friend decided to be so wholesome at the end of the night. "Went home with eye candy, I guess. Just be safe tonight. Text me when you get home." I think I was able to put together all the pieces with that part. She went out to the club with her friend in a bid to make me jealous. She met a guy there, and in all interpretations that I could muster up in my mind, that night ended with her probably slipping past her friend, going home with that guy, getting wasted, could have happened before leaving, who knows, and very likely sleeping with him. I mean, there was literally no reason for me to believe that she didn't sleep with him. The text message from her friend was also over an hour before she got home, and unless she went to the club on the other side of town, that didn't compute. She had to have gone somewhere else, and I knew it had to have been that guy's house. The thing is, I wanted to beat the stupid guy's face in, but I had no idea who he was, and I was pretty sure she didn't either. That just made it worse for me. It just had to be some random guy that she decided to ruin our marriage with. Then I started thinking of everything that must have happened between them, and yeah, I think I wanted to break something at that point. I started shaking her violently to get her to wake up, but no matter how much I tried, she didn't even stir beyond making one tired groan. I just gave up and headed downstairs to try and sleep. Obviously, that didn't work out for me because I was thinking way too much. I hate it when it seems like your entire life is about to change in a second, and I especially hated it in this case because it was going to change because of a trigger that was so stupid. The thing is, I recognized that even though the trigger was dumb, if somebody was willing to cheat on me so matter-of-factly, then it meant that I shouldn't even have been with that kind of person in the first place. I'm sure you can tell from my reaction that there was no way I was about to hold what I had found out to myself. The moment she showed up downstairs in the morning, I went off on her. I asked her again what she went to do the previous night, and she seemed to think about whether to lie or not before saying that she went to the club with her friend. I asked her if that was it, and she said it was. I mentioned how drunk she was the previous night, and she didn't seem to remember much about what had happened the previous night. That part wasn't surprising considering the state she was in. Since she couldn't even verify anything, I decided to rope her in. "In your drunkenness, you admitted to me that you cheated on me." She perked up immediately as I said that, and then started shaking her head, saying, "Never," over and over. I mean, if I hadn't known that she went home with someone, the reaction would have given it away. If I had accused her of that when she truly hadn't cheated on me, the reaction would have been a lot more aggressive than what I was getting. She was going for potential damage control. I told her that there were pictures on her phone of her in bed with the guy. She grabbed her phone instantly and she seemed panicked as she raced to her gallery. When she didn't see anything like what I described, she said, "What are you talking about?" I asked her why she had to check to see if those pictures were there when she knew she hadn't done anything the previous night. She said it could have happened when she was drunk. I asked her why. As a married woman, she went out to the club and got so drunk that someone could have potentially slept with her and she wouldn't have any recollection. She didn't have anything to say to that. At that point, I was tired of playing games and I told her that I had seen her pictures cozied up with the guy in the club and I had seen her friend's text message that basically proved that she had gone home with him. I mentioned how long it took after that text to when she got home and how she had definitely been somewhere else. She really didn't have anything to say to that. I just let her know that it was good that we both knew the truth, and I told her right there that I wanted a divorce. She couldn't say anything to that, and I really wasn't surprised. It was much better than her trying to beg me. I just walked out at that point and took a long drive. It was during the drive that I parked somewhere and started looking for a good divorce attorney. I eventually found one, went to his office, and paid a retainer. I was not going to leave any space for her to try and get me back. I didn't want any part of it. When I got back home, she started pleading. I guess she had had time to think about things, and she realized how much she didn't want to lose what we had. She was clearly trying to tug on my heartstrings because she started talking about all the plans we made for the future. What about the kids we wanted to have? What about traveling the world and going to Cambodia at the end of the year? What about the dream retirement home we wanted to build? Amidst saying all of this, she was crying her eyes out. I'll admit that I felt a slight twinge of regret at how all those plans were going to dissolve into thin air, but I didn't let myself take the blame for it. The next day, I left the house and found a motel to sleep in. I really couldn't stay in the same house as her any longer, even if I was sleeping on the couch far away from her. Fortunately, it didn't take long to get the divorce papers drafted, and once they were ready, I got them sent to her through a process server while she was at work. Obviously, she was very angry about that, but it only put a smile on my face. As much as I had loved this person a few weeks before all of the drama, it wasn't hard for me to feel such strong resentment for her. I think it was because of that resentment that I decided to do even worse. If there was a single person who she allowed to get on her nerves the most, it was Daisy. The poor woman wasn't even in her life anymore, but any mention of Daisy meant that something nasty would follow. There might have been more to the story than Lily let on because her reaction always seemed out of proportion. There might have been some jealousy at play though, as Daisy had returned to academia after their time in college, and she was doing pretty good for herself. I decided to hit up Daisy, and it had been so long since we last talked that my first name wasn't enough for her to recall who I was. The last name added did the trick, and she seemed genuinely glad to hear from me. She's always been super sweet. We had a little small talk, and when she asked about Lily, I was glad to tell her that we were getting divorced. She paused for a bit before sharing her apologies. I told her that I'd love it if we could meet up and catch up. She didn't have a problem with that. So that's how Daisy and I met up at a local cafe and caught up. I enjoyed it a lot more than I actually expected to. I think I was seeing Daisy in an entirely new light, not just because I had sought her out to make my soon-to-be ex-wife jealous, but because the fact that I was heading to divorce let me actually see her as a prospect. We spent about 2 hours talking, and at the end of it, we hugged and it felt so good. I had actually missed her a lot. From that point, we started to keep in touch with one another, and that one meetup ended up becoming us talking on a nearly daily basis. Now, before anything happened with Daisy and I have to return to the whole divorce story. I won't bore you, but I had to give up the house, even with the evidence I tried to present. The problem was that my evidence involved a lot of assumptions, and it didn't necessarily help my case the way I wished it would have. There was no proof she was unfaithful as far as the judge was concerned. Giving up the house saved me alimony, though, and for that much, I had to be grateful. Lily and I barely spoke at that point, unless it somehow involved the after effects of the divorce. Since I was free, I started to hang out with Daisy a whole lot more than I used to, and I loved every single second of it. She was basically the perfect woman, and the sole fact that we could have arguments and not hate each other at the end of it meant a lot to me. I don't know where it came from, but one day I moved to kiss her, and she returned it. That's when we started dating. We were relatively quiet about things, so Lily didn't have an idea that we were together. Well, until we went to Cambodia together. Yep, the same Cambodia that was in our plans. I posted the pictures of Daisy and I, and to say that Lily lost her crap would be an understatement. She called me every single name under the sun. She was clearly furious. She started to post very specific messages on Facebook, which were clearly meant to reference us. She also said that Cambodia was something we were meant to do together, and that I intentionally went with Daisy despite her. I mean, that was only partly true. I was going to have gone away to get my mind off her, but it was even better for me to do that along with my new girlfriend. Daisy said she had been getting threatening messages from Lily too, but back when they were friends, they had been friends long enough for those things not to faze her. Pretty spontaneously, Daisy suggested that we take a trip to Thailand, and I only said yes because it was truly something I wanted to do. It had nothing to do with spiting a certain someone, though that was obviously a perk. When I captioned it, "Looks like me and Daisy might need to start a travel blog," I'll admit that was partly done to drive her nuts, because it had always been something she had joked around about. She was very clearly in pain seeing me bounce back, and with the one person she probably hated the most, her former best friend. Obviously, with my house gone, I moved in with Daisy, and things have been smooth. We look forward to the future pretty positively, because things feel so good with the two of us. At some point, I'll propose and children will enter the picture too. I can't wait to be a dad. I'm going to keep living my best life with her, and if the things I do with Daisy rub Lily the wrong way, then that's merely a perk of business. All I know is that I'm as happy as can be, and she's constantly filled with rage seeing me happy with Daisy. That works well for me. The way Lily escalated a minor disagreement into a full-blown night of calculated spite says a lot about her character, or lack thereof. I mean, for real. Sounds like this was already on fire, and she just decided to give it oxygen. Whatever. Her loss and your gain. She wanted to make you jealous? Congratulations, Lily. Mission accomplished. After all, what are friends for if not to retaliate? Have you ever reconnected with an old friend like this? Share your stories with us below. And thank you for joining us today on rSpace. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. See you soon!